So we're going to be looking at parabolas today.
Gideon.
We are, so what we're doing today, like all of our notes are basically shoved into this one slide today. So make sure you get these notes because you're going to use them throughout the whole lesson.
Okay.
Because there's quite a bit here. What?
Are you recording?
What?
Are you recording?
Yeah.
I'm being weird.
That's not
You're
possible.
No, my
You
elbow.
gotta
I don't know why I'd ask you to stop. I don't think you can.
Why are we
Why is the axis of symmetry
So if
wrong?
you're not trying to do it, you can go back and watch
Are you
it.
playing this on YouTube?
Yeah, he did. We're in 11th grade now.
I can't hear you.
Alright. I'm just hitting the screen.
Okay, let's get on with
Okay.
the lesson,
I know
you guys.
you guys are as bad as
Listen.
freshmen. So we're going to look at an equation for a parabola. So my equation right here is f of x. Sometimes it can be y of x. It doesn't really matter. Remember, f of x and y, they work the same way. Just one's a function and one's just a regular y. Functions are kind of special. We've talked about them a little bit. We'll talk about them more later. For right now, just don't worry about it. So my equation is a parentheses x minus h squared outside my parentheses, and then plus k. When we look at this,
Does it have to be a plus?
no, it doesn't have to be plus. When we look at this, my x is always going to be an x, but a, h, and k are numbers that are going to change. And then it's always a squared right there. A parabola always has an exponent of 2. So we can go through and we can learn, or we can find a bunch of things about a parabola based off of this formula. So to start with, this number a out here in the very front is going to stretch or compress our parabola. And I forgot to put in here a vertical stretch or vertical compress. We did these before with absolute value, remember?
Yeah.
Vertical stretch, vertical compress, same type of thing. So it's a stretch if it's bigger than 1 or smaller than -1. And it's a compress if it's a decimal between -1 and 1. So if it's a stretch, it gets skinnier. If it's a compress, it gets fatter. Think of it like you were stretching out like taffy or something.
Wait, what if it's a 0?
It gets thinner when you stretch it. It gets fatter if you squish it down. If it's 0, it's not a parabola. Because 0 times, I don't care what this is, it's still 0.
Yeah.
So it'd just be k,
Okay.
not a parabola. So it has to be anything but 0.
How do you
So
say
it'd
that
be
word?
-1.
Parabola.
Parabola.
Parabola. Probably. If not, oh well. Teach math on English.
Parabola sounds like a disease.
A little bit. Alright, so A is going to be my stretch or
It is, it's
compress.
math.
My H is going to move my parabola left or right. But it is the opposite of what our sign is. So it's either going to go left or right, but it's the opposite. And we talked about this with absolute value
Technically,
also.
numbers can't move.
So if you guys can think back to a couple chapters ago, if I had the absolute value of like x plus 2, like this, I'm not going right 2, I'm actually going left 2. Same thing with parabolas. If I have a minus, I'm really going to the right. If I have a plus, I'm really going left.
And then on the outside of it.
Yes, I know that is another
That's
thing
a
I forgot to say.
compression.
If A is negative, it's a flip. And our parabola goes upside down. I forgot to put that in here, but we'll see.
Negative
So instead of
flip.
looking like a big U, it'll be flipped upside down and look kind of like this.
If that A.
Yeah. If this A in front is negative, it's a flip. So it'll look kind of like a mountain or hill, I guess, instead of a U. And you'll see that. A lot of this is really, really similar to absolute value. So you guys have pretty much done this before. It's just now it's parabolas instead of absolute value V's. So H goes left to right, but it's the opposite of what you think. K is up or down, and it's just whatever you see. If it's plus, it goes up. If it's minus, it goes down. So that's whatever you see. And this is where it gets a little bit different than absolute value. If I take my H and I take my K, and remember H, since it's the opposite, my H is the opposite of whatever sign is there. And we'll look at that later. But if I take HK, that is what's called the vertex of my parabola. And my vertex is my very bottom or very top point. It kind of depends on which way it's facing. So if I'm going to look at this parabola right here, up here in the top right, my vertex is way down here at the bottom. Right at the very bottom. That's my vertex. Because it's the very bottom point. I don't have a very top point because my parabola, even though I didn't put it on here because I took a screenshot or something, these lines for my parabola go on forever. So there's not a very top point because it never stops. Yeah, it just keeps going up and up and up. But I have a very bottom point right here at my vertex. That's that special word for that point.
So when you flip it, you do have a very top.
Yeah, and then if it's upside down, so for example, if it gets flipped upside down like this, I have a very top point, my vertex would be right there. That would be my vertex right there, my very top point. And then this next thing, our axis of symmetry, is in a parabola. And an axis of symmetry is a line that splits the parabola in half, or the graph in half. Graph in half. I'm a poet. So, if I were to fold my graph along my axis of symmetry, my two halves would match up. They'd line up perfect. Because it's in the very middle. And for my axis of symmetry, it is a line at x equals h. Remember, x equals means it's straight up and down. So all our parabolas will be straight up and down today. Well, for this whole chapter. I don't think we'll get to left and right parabolas. Maybe if you take like algebra 3 or something.
So
Yeah, no
x
thanks.
equals h.
Actually, I'm not
Yeah. So your axis of symmetry, when it's x equals h, basically what this means is that if you make a straight up and down line through your vertex, you have your axis of symmetry. So if I make a line right here through my vertex, when I do axis of symmetry, I usually dot it so I know that's what it is, or dash it, excuse me. This is my axis of symmetry in the green right here. Yes. Sorry, this is kind of a bad color for the projector. I think my projector bulb is dying.
That's good.
It's not very bright.
Just open the light.
Just a little bit of-
I haven't asked you guys to pay attention with the lights off.
I don't trust myself to pay attention to the lights.
I can.
Turn it off. You're James snoring or something.
Yeah, turn off the lights. We'll prove 'em
So
wrong.
is Gene.
Huh? Turn off the
Huh?
lights.
Fall asleep with them on.
Some people have a hard enough time paying attention with the lights on.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Bless
What if we
you.
turn the lights off? Can we still, like, can the microphone still hear us?
Alright, so what we're going to be doing today is mostly just labeling our vertex, labeling our axis of symmetry, and we're going to graph without using Desmos, really.
No more Desmond.
I hate you.
Which is nice. Alright, so we're going to look at this equation, this parabola right here.
Hey.
And we are going to find our vertex, and we're going to find if it's a vertical stretch, and we're going to find our axis of symmetry. So, for my vertex, it is at... Okay, let me back up. So, before I do anything else, I'm going to go through and look at my equation, 3 parentheses x minus 4 squared minus 2, and I'm going to label each part. So this 3 out in front is my A. My A is 3, and I'm actually... I'll write it over here. So I have my A is 3, my H is this 4 right here, but we got to be careful. H isn't just
Oh, I did.
this negative 4, because it's that x minus, so my H is actually a positive 4. Because it's backwards. Remember how if I'm minusing, I'm really going right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's backwards. This is really positive 4 and not negative 4, so you got to be careful with your H. Your K is regular, whatever you see, but H is kind of the sneaky one. So I have my A is 3, H is 4, and my K, and then my K on the very end. K, it's just whatever you see. K is negative 2 because it's got the minus.
Down to.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label where my vertex is. You can see it on the graph here. It's my very bottom point right there. But we're going to do it without actually looking at, or without just looking at our graph. So my vertex is at H, comma, K. And because I went through first before I labeled my A, H, and K, it's pretty easy to fill out because my H is 4, my K is negative 2, and that's all I need. That is where my vertex is. It is at the point 4, -2.
And then your axis is symmetric.
Vert stretch by.
Then if I look at my next part, I should have said, is it a vertical stretch or vertical compression, but I don't know why I didn't. Oh well. So we're going to have a vertical stretch, and it's by whatever my number for A is. So my A is 3, right? So I'm going to have a vertical stretch by 3. So it's been stretched by a factor of 3. And then my axis of symmetry, and I don't remember if I said this, but for axis of symmetry I usually abbreviate as AOS because that's a pain to write. For my axis of symmetry, it is at x equals h, is what that line is. So my axis of symmetry for my actual line is going to be at x equals h is 4. And if I were to make that on my graph, it would look right there. Straight up and down line on 4.
Somewhat straight.
Yeah, it's good enough. We're doing it by hand, so.
Alright, that's it.
Yeah, we're gonna keep doing a few. Alright, let's look at our next one here. So let me have you guys help me out a little bit. We're gonna look at A, H, and K. So on this next one, LMA, start us off. What is A on this equation for my parabola down right here?
-1.
-1. James, what's my H?
4.
This one. Bottom one.
4. Or -1.
-1, good. Way to remember to flip the sign, because that's not a positive one. Because it's x minus h, it's the opposite of what you think. So my h is really -1. And then the last one, or Maya, what's my k? 2. So I have everything I need to find my vertex, to say if it's a vertical stretch, and to say what my axis of symmetry is. So my vertex is at h, k. So Raven, tell me what my vertex is with my actual numbers now. Alright, our vertex is at h, k. So if I'm going to look at my numbers, and I've already labeled here for A, H, and K, what's my H?
1 or -1.
-1. What's my K?
2.
My vertex is at the point -1, 2, which, when we look at our graph, is right here. Okay, let's keep going through. Carissa, is this going to have a... I phrased this wrong. So this is, because it's the number 1, when A is exactly 1, it's not a stretch or compression at all. But because A is negative, Carissa, what's special about this graph when A is negative? James. Huh? Do you get that part copied down? I had to add it on. Alright, do you remember back when we talked about absolute value, if I had a negative out in front, what it did to your absolute value? Yeah, it flipped, right? Same thing with parabolas. So we have a flip in this parabola. It's flipped upside down. Alright, let's keep going. Jaden, where's my axis of symmetry? Well, it's at x equals h. So what's our number for h up here? So we're at x equals -1 for our axis of symmetry. So if I'm going to go to -1, it's right here. Right. Yeah, good enough line.
Do you think
Look at
that
that one. Yeah, it's fine. It's good enough. Good enough, James.
No. I'm triggered.
All right, let's I should add another in-class problem for this, but that's okay. You know, we'll move into graphing, and when you do graphing, you'll be basically doing the same stuff. So we're going to go through, and we are going to graph some of these parabolas. So this time around, we are not going to be we're not going to be looking at a graph and just kind of labeling it. We're going to graph them ourselves. So I'm going to be looking at f of x equals -2, parentheses, x minus 1 squared, and then plus 3. So before I do anything else, let's find our a, h, and k. So Helena, start us off. What's our a? -2. Devin, what's our k? Or excuse me, h.
H is 1.
1, yep. Positive 1.
I thought so too.
Because remember, h is the sneaky one. It's the opposite of what you see. That -1 is really right one, so it's positive. And then our last one, Basin, what's our k?
Wait,
Alright, so I've got my A, H, and K. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to label a few things, and then we're going to graph it. So Austin, help me out. What's my vertex going to be?
Which one's that? Oh wait, that's the.
Yep. You will need to check back on your notes to see some of this stuff,
That's the H.
because I don't expect you to
So
memorize it.
that's 1 and 3.
Our vertex is at HK. H is 1, K is 3. My vertex is at 1, 3. Okay.
Do we have to do the prints?
Yes, because it's an XY coordinate or an ordered pair. So let's keep going through. We are going to have an axis of symmetry. Oh, let me pick. Yeah, we'll keep going around. James, what's my axis of symmetry going to be at? Look it up. There's a lot of notes all kind of crammed into one slide, so don't worry about taking them.
3?
Yep. And we got to be careful. Axis of symmetry, to fully answer it, I got to say x equals 3. Yep. Oh, no.
It's one.
No, it's 1. Wrong one.
What?
Nope.
What did I do wrong?
I saw 3 on the end. No, it's x equals h. What's my h in this one? 1. 1. My bad.
What did you say?
It's not 7.
22.
All right,
It looks
and
like
then
7.
on this one, LMA, am I going to have a stretch, a vertical stretch, or a vertical compress?
Neither.
Socks weird. The socks longer
A
than the
vertical. So we have a is -2, right? Look back on your notes about a. They were kind of the very first ones.
I think it's a flip. I don't know if it's stretch or compress or it's a flip.
I give you compress stretch.
I think it's a
One of the
compress.
two.
It just says flip.
It is a vertical stretch because compress is basically a decimal. If it's a little decimal, it's a compress. So this is going to be a stretch, and it's going to be by a factor
That's why
of
it's a
2,
stretch.
because that's what my number is. But what's the other thing that we're going to have in this parabola with that negative for our... Since a is negative, what are we going to have?
So wait, why is it a -2, not just 2?
Because it's a stretch by 2, and the negative does something else.
I hope so.
I was asking what it
Oh, I thought you were asking why.
And then, you know what the negative does, Ome?
No.
It flips it.
Oh.
It flips it upside down.
Subtract.
Alright. So we are going to graph this parabola. And it's really not too bad. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my vertex, and I'm going to graph I'm going to put a dot for my vertex at 1, 3. I'm going to go right 1, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to put a dot. That's my
Oh my
vertex.
god, that's weird.
What'd you do?
No. His jaw's like right here. He goes.
So, I'm also going to put my axis of symmetry on here,
It was down.
real quick. It is at x equals 1, or it goes right through my vertex. It's straight up and down. I'm just going to put my axis of symmetry real quick.
Why doesn't it always go to the vertex?
What?
Why doesn't it always go to the vertex?
It always does.
Oh yeah, never mind.
Yeah. I maybe draw bad sometimes.
No, this one I
All the
just
time.
I thought like -1 was like right after 0, so it's like
Okay.
It is right after
So, the reason we're doing our axis of symmetry is because if I know, since it's right in the middle, it like cuts our graph in half perfect. If I know where a point is on, say, the left side, I also know that if I flip it over that line, I'm going to have the same point on the right side. So it's nice because I can just find a couple points on the left, and I can copy them to the right side. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick an x left or right of the vertex. And I'm going to pick an easy one. I'm going to pick 0.
0, 0.
I'm going to pick just an x.
Oh.
Because we're going to plug our x in to find our y. So I'm going to pick a nice easy one, which is 0. I'm going to pick 0 for x. And I'm going to plug that in to my equation up here.
Oh, God.
And I'm going to solve it to find my y. But 0 is pretty nice because it makes it a little easier. So I'm going to have -2
0 plus 2
parentheses 0 minus 1
That's 3.
parentheses squared and then plus 3. And I just need to go through and solve this to find my y. So 0 minus 1,
See, I told you
negative
7
1.
is probably-
We could just plug this into Desmos, but I'm just going to do it real quick because
So
I'm
when you square
figuring.
-1, you get
So we square -1 and we get +1. -2 times +1 is -2. Plus 3 is 1. So plug this into Desmos. If you're not sure, that's fine. It's just quicker for me to just go through it really quick instead of trying to switch
Me
back
and
and forth
Austin
on the
got
screen.
7.
I want to look at that again.
We
Did you
know,
distribute?
distribute, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't distribute?
Yeah, don't distribute.
Okay.
You don't distribute
Don't
first?
distribute, because you got that exponent first. Yeah. Just plug this into
But
Desmos.
it's parentheses.
Just
Yeah,
plug
and
this part into
exponent.
Desmos.
Alright, we'll check.
Okay, so plug it
No,
into
no.
Desmos or do it in your head. And we get 1. So when I plug in 0 for x, I get 1 for y. So I also have the point 0, 1 on my graph. So I'm going to graph that. I'm going to left and right 0, up 1. And I'm going to put a dot there. And the reason I'm doing this 1 dot is because you see how this green dot right here, this green dot I made, it is 1 away from my axis of symmetry right here,
There's a way
right?
you can do it on the keyboard. Oh, this.
Hush, you guys want to see this unless you like graphing a whole lot. Okay, my green dot I just found because I plugged in 0 for my x and I found 1 for y. To go from my green dot to my axis of symmetry, I got to go right 1. If I go right 1 again from there, that is another dot.
Why are they colored?
Because my axis of symmetry, it cuts my graph perfectly in half. So if I have 1 away from my axis of symmetry on the left, I have 1 away from my axis of symmetry on the right. So I've got my dots on there. And this is all I need to graph my parabola. So because it's flipped upside down, it's going to look kind of like a mountain or a hill or something. So to make my parabola, I'm going to start here on my vertex. I'm going to go through my 2 points. Kind of like this.
It looks
like a
like
boat.
Yeah, a little bit. And that's it. It seems like a lot. Well, it is kind of a lot, but it gets a little easier after a while because you get quicker with your vertex and axis of symmetry and stuff.
You said that about matrices.
And they did get a little quicker. Like 10 minutes quicker per problem.
Yeah, I just skipped it.
Yeah, it's called just
Cookie, can I use the bathroom?
After lesson. Alright. So let's keep going. We're going to do 1 or 2 more. You guys are going to try a few. We might work on these a little bit tomorrow also.
What? So there's no assignment?
No, you'll have an assignment.
Ah,
We might have extra practice tomorrow.
no.
So we're going to keep going. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to find our vertex, axis of symmetry, and then we are going to graph it. So before I do anything else, I'm going to find my A,
I was thinking the first one.
my H, and my K. So let's keep going through. I think we're at, or Maya, what's my A?
Should be one of them.
-2. Carissa, what's my H?
Axis of symmetry.
Close. Remember, -1. H is the sneaky one. So it's the opposite of a +1, which means it's -1. It's sneaky. And then Raven, what's my K?
Stretches.
Yep.
Stretch.
A is 3. Okay, so we are going to make our vertex at HK. What is that, Jaden?
What?
What's my vertex?
1, -1. What? What's 1? Sorry.
What's my vertex?
-1.
What?
What? Negative 1,
22.
Negative
What?
1,
What?
Okay, yeah, there we go.
What?
I was here at 1, -1, I don't know.
He said
Negative
Say
1,
one
3.
negative.
Negative 1, 3.
Alright, negative 1, 3 is my vertex.
Looks like
And-
a negative 135.
You're an
He
idiot.
does.
You guys are dumb.
No, weird.
No.
Oh, we're not.
Okay, -1. -1.
Problem solved.
Say something good.
Alright, Devin, what's my axis of symmetry?
One negative
What? And don't forget x equals negative.
stretches by 2.
And then we are, let's not worry about the stretch or compress, that's not as important as these other parts, so we're not gonna worry about that. But we are gonna look at, the only thing we're gonna say, Helena,
-1.
because
plus
A
3.
is negative, what do we know about this?
So 2, 0.
It's a flip. So that's the only other thing I'm gonna look at, there's a flip there. Alright, so I'm gonna have to go through and graph my vertex.
Put the X in.
It is at -1, 3. Left 1, up 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna put my dot. My axis of symmetry, straight up and down line through there.
I don't want
0.
Oh, yeah, because you. Okay, never mind.
I have my axis of symmetry. Now I just need to figure out
Don't distribute.
1 point. Because if I have 1 point, I can reflect it over my axis of symmetry to my other point. Yes, David.
I got the answer.
Okay. So Dazen, we need to pick an x, right?
Yes.
Which x did you pick?
0.
0 is a good one. Okay. So we are gonna plug in. We're gonna plug in 0 for our x, and we're gonna figure out what we get for our y after we plug it in.
-2 plus 3 is
So we're gonna go -2,
It's 1 plus
0 plus 1
Yeah.
So it's just
The
one.
-1
Squared.
plus 3.
plus 3.
Plus 2.
So just plug this into Desmos.
What?
0 plus 1 is 1. 1 squared is still 1.
Explain this.
Yeah, plug it in Desmos. You know what? Let's just do it so you can see. Since we got people confused.
You Austin always disagree. He's like, what? Like Jaden.
Alright, so we're going -2, 0. What was it?
What did I do wrong?
0 plus
0 plus 1
0
squared
0 plus 1
plus 3.
1.
Plug it into Desmos and I get 1.
It's 1.
So where did I go then?
Alright, so I get 1 when I plug it into Desmos. So I have the point 0, 1
Negative.
on my graph. I plugged in an x that I picked and I got 1 out of it. So I'm going to go to 0, 1, and I'm going to put a dot there. And then this is where
So we
the axis of symmetry is nice.
move down 1.
So, Austin,
Yes, sir.
this 0, 1 dot I just made, how far away is it from my axis of symmetry? It is, and I gotta go, so let me rephrase. How can I go from this dot to get to my axis of symmetry?
You were left by 1.
I go left 1, which means if I go left 1 again, from there, I got my second dot. And this is all I need to make my parabola.
Tabulos.
So I'm gonna go for my vertex.
Tabulos.
I'm gonna go through my 2 points here.
Oh my god.
Wait, what did I do? Oh, I'm trying to think of what I did wrong.
We could go up
0 plus 1
Did you
is
distribute
1.
the...
No. 0 plus 1 is 1.
Alright, we're gonna do an in-class problem here.
1 times
And then
1 squared is
We'll maybe
1.
do one more and then that'll be it. So let's actually,
-2 plus 1.
let's skip the next one and we're gonna go to the one after that.
What did I do wrong?
I don't know, David. Alright, we're gonna skip this
Need
problem
help, go
and
back.
we are gonna go.
How do you do it?
What? I don't do what?
That problem.
Oh. On this one, do you see parentheses? Which means your h is 0. But we'll skip ones like that alone. Just make it easy.
H is 0.
Alright, I'm gonna go into this one. So, on this one, I'll get you guys started by finding A, H, and K, and then you guys are going to do the rest. So, as we go through on this one, Devin, what's my A?
Your A is -2.
What's my H?
Your H is +1.
And then what's my K?
Your 3.
Alright, to get you guys started, we have A, H, and K. So what I want you to do, find your vertex, find your axis of symmetry, don't worry about the stretch or compress part, we're not going to worry about that for now. That's not as important as the other two things. And then graph it. So I want you to try this on your own. At least start on your own. Get your
What
vertex
did I
and
do?
axis of symmetry.
I know I did, I just can't remember.
So get your vertex, get your axis of symmetry. If you don't remember what your vertex is, check your notes. That very first line of notes has everything on it.
What did I do wrong? Okay, so 0.
What'd you get?
I got 2.
I got 1 again.
Okay, 0 plus 1.
0 plus 1. 1. Yes.
Squared.
Is 1.
Okay.
How do you figure out where?
All times negative. God.
You added it?
Little
Alright.
things. Yeah, I added it.
Yep.
Goalkeeper is right.
Okay, I am still confused.
It's the exact same as the last one.
Vertex.
A different quadrant.
Yeah, basically. That's looking pretty
What?
Exactly.
good. Looks good.
Axis of symmetry is 1, right?
I actually like doing this. I hate graphing, but I like doing
X equals 1. Stretch or compress. Stretch.
It's only a compressive set.
Yeah. Stretch. Flip. So stretch by 2.
But
Flip.
like if it's like a
This right here, this has all the notes.
and the vertex is all
So
the
it's
notes.
at
Oh, that's
HK, right?
okay.
You already have it there.
Mhm.
So, that coordinate.
How'd you get negative 1 so that
0.
It's X if there's nothing there.
0 for X.
X if there's nothing
axis
there.
is symmetry?
So the vertex is
Oh, it'd just be.
Right, 0.
Are we not doing that?
Then it'd be a compressed, right?
But those are the
Yeah, just do
AHK.
0.
But it's not, because you compress if it's greater than negative 1 or less than 1. 0 is.
Zeros in between.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I said that at the beginning.
but I don't know if it'd be compressed.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you
Your vertex.
Negative 1
yeah, it's just negative 1.
times
Your vertex
2
is like
plus 3 is 5. Did you get 5?
I get that one.
What do I do wrong? Okay. Negative 1 squared. Negative 1 squared is 1, right? Oh, I'm just trying to help me out here. Negative 1
That
squared
one,
is 1.
You're doing the wrong one.
Negative
You
2
mean this
is
one
1.
here stuff.
So we need
I don't know, is it wrong first?
How's that five?
I don't know.
So, H is your one.
I don't even.
So plug in 0 for your X up here. Solve it.
Iowa,
And after that, I can help you the left side.
vertex.
Yeah, I remember that. It's just a second. I just put negative 1.
And then your vertex.
Activation.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this one.
Okay.
Now put that in
Vertex, there is none. It's just be y. 0.
Wait a second, think about it. It's brand new.
Oh,
Gotta mull it over a little bit.
there. Alright, now.
What if it's-
your axis is
Yeah.
symmetry.
What is it 0?
There's, there.
does that mean it's, oh, it's not there, it's a 1?
And then you go,
Okay, so it's a little stretch.
That's
It's a normal parabola or whatever.
What's your axis of symmetry?
yeah.
Vertex, negative 2
Stretch.
by 1. Axis of symmetry, negative 2. Axis of symmetry.
Okay.
Graph.
So, what we need to do is we need to find a point somewhere left or right. Because if I find that, I can just reflect it over this line to get my center. Because this is right in the middle, right? So it's like fold it in half to have a line curve. So if I know one on this side, I know one on that side. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick an X that's not right here. So there's one doesn't matter. One, you can do it.
Wait, it's 4, right?
So
Or
plug in
3?
1 for X right here. And solve for Y.
So -2 plus.
Oh, you, okay, that's right.
Do the inside parentheses and then square it first.
Yes.
So do 1 plus 1
We do the exit ticket. Check my
times negative 2. Am I doing right?
I know, I'm making my job bigger.
Rise over 1.
So we're not doing
No.
2 or
Oh, math class.
and plus 3. So we have 1 negative 5.
5 over 2 is a big proper fraction. I just learned that.
I actually don't remember
And
the
make
converter.
your axis symmetry go down a little farther so it's easier to see.
Alright, okay, what's this exit?
This is right in the middle, right? So
Yeah,
axis symmetry,
I like
which
this
means-
stuff. Like center.
Right? Yep. Just
Let's
like
do
this.
it,
Yeah.
sort of.
There you go. Now connect your dots.
That's right. We
All right.
saw the didn't put up any Christmas decorations.
I'll give you another minute or so, and then we'll probably skip our exit ticket just to give you time to start something. Lots of practice.
It's easy now. I just forget to grab it sometimes.
My head hurts.
We need paper.
So what you gotta do now is you need to pick a point on one of the sides. Picking up the point. It doesn't matter which one. So that is 2, right? So take the number 2. Solve it to get your y.
Grab my A's different.
Houston.
So here, minus 1. You do the parentheses part first and then square. Alright, let's have. Actually.
So no stopping too?
Probably not.
Page 199. That's too low.
Dazen, graph this on the board for us.
This is fake. I never do pigs.
I picked between you and Austin. We had to be even. Austin had odds. You lucked out. Alright, Dazen's gonna graph this on the board for us. If you're not done yet, that's fine. Keep working on it, and then check your answer with Dazen's. Just make your parabola. Don't worry about your showing all your work for your point and stuff.
I have an issue not running these.
James, wow, not away. 9. Alright, looks pretty good. Nice job, Dazen.
Thank you.
So, check your parabola with Dazen's. See if it looks at least pretty close. It might look a little off just because you're doing it by hand.
We can do all these.
Huh? Alright, and then to give you guys some extra time, we're going to skip our exit ticket and go straight to homework. So, make sure you have this down. I will put the homework on Google Classroom in just a second.
It's not hard.
Actually, it's on.
We can do all these.
It's on your homework, or it's on in your book. So get started on your homework. We're skipping our exit ticket.
Can I go fill up my water?
Devin was first, I think.
So that's cool what you're